Imagine it's the year 1300. You're standing on the Ponte Vecchio in Florence, watching a merchant caravan arrive from England. They're carrying wool, just raw wool, but the transaction you're witnessing is worth more than most people will earn in their lifetime. That wool travelled 1,200 miles without a single modern technology. No trucks, no telegraphs, no credit cards. Yet the financial instruments facilitating this trade, the letters of credit, the insurance contracts, the double-entry accounting tracking every florin, are so sophisticated that we're still using them today. This is the autopsy of the system that invented modern capitalism. By the end of this video, you'll understand why your Amazon delivery, your cryptocurrency wallet, and your corporate supply chain all descend from innovations created by Florentine wool merchants who died 700 years ago. And why every single pattern they discovered, including the catastrophic failures, is repeating right now. This gets dark, then it gets useful. In the year 1200, Florence has 50,000 people. By 1300, 1 century later, it has 120,000 in the city alone, plus another 300,000 in the surrounding countryside. Italy becomes the most urbanized society on Earth, at 20% urban population. These people aren't farmers, they're wool workers. The Arte della Lana, the Wool Guild, directly employs 30,000 workers and indirectly supports 1/3 of Florence's entire population. They're producing 100,000 lengths of cloth annually. But here's what makes this a supply chain revolution. Florence doesn't have sheep. The wool comes from England. The dyes come from the Levant. The finished cloth goes to markets in Flanders, southern France, across the Mediterranean. This is globalized production in 1300, organized through wealthy merchant firms contracting with independent workers spread across the city and countryside. Spinners, weavers, fullers, dyers, all working in separate locations coordinated through inspection and certification. Sound familiar? That's your modern gig economy. That's companies like Nike designing in Oregon, sourcing materials in 12 countries, and assembling in Vietnam. Same pattern, different century. And here's what drives the whole system. Taxes on imported wool, excise on finished cloth, guild fees, export tariffs. Together they form one of Florence's largest revenue streams. The prosperity of wool merchants determines whether the city can pay its soldiers, fund civic improvements, survive. The math is brutal. When trade works, everyone eats. When it breaks, the entire city collapses. Now let me show you the innovation that made all of this possible. Double-entry bookkeeping. Before this system, if you ran a business with operations in multiple cities, handling deposits from the Pope, making loans to royalty, conducting currency exchanges across Europe, you had no systematic way to track where your money actually was. You'd go bankrupt and not even know why. Double-entry bookkeeping solved this with one equation. Assets equal liabilities plus equity. Every transaction gets recorded twice, as a credit and a debit. Different columns, perfect balance, always. The Medici Bank pioneered its systematic application. When Luca Pacioli finally wrote down the method in 1494, he devoted 150 pages to explaining what Florentine bankers had been doing for decades. Trial balances, balance sheets, profit and loss statements. Here's why this matters. When manufacturers like Josiah Wedgwood adopted this system centuries later, they could suddenly distinguish fixed costs from variable costs. They discovered the economics of mass production. They transformed manufacturing. Modern supply chain management, tracking inventory across continents, calculating profit margins in real time, analyzing which products actually make money, is literally impossible without the accounting framework these Florentine merchants invented. Your chief financial officer, your enterprise resource planning system, your blockchain transparency, all of it descends from Florentine wool traders trying to figure out if the cloth they shipped to Bruges 3 months ago had actually been paid for. But accounting only works if you can trust the currency, which brings us to 1252 and the invention that changed everything. The Florentine florin. 3.5 grams of pure gold, consistent quality, maintained without debasement for 280 years, 1252 to 1533. Nearly 3 centuries without cheating, without reducing the gold content, without inflation games. The Florentines had a saying stamped on every coin, San Giovanni non vuole inganni, St. John does not want deceptions. The image of St. John the Baptist was your guarantee of authenticity. By 1300, the florin becomes the international reserve currency. Merchants from the Levant to the Baltic accept it. Approximately 150 European states create copies, the Hungarian forint, various ducats, all imitating the florin's weight and purity. This gives Florence seigneurage rents, the ability to profit from minting currency. Foreign merchants bring raw gold to Florence to be minted into florins. They pay fees. Florence captures the spread between market value and face value. It's essentially printing money legitimately. But here's the genius move that made long-distance trade actually work: the letter of credit. Picture this. You're a Florentine cloth merchant travelling to London, carrying 1,000 gold florins through bandit-infested territories for weeks. One robbery and you're ruined. Solution: deposit 1,000 florins at the Florence branch of the Medici Bank. Receive a piece of parchment, a letter of credit, authorising the London branch to pay you the equivalent in pounds, sterling after a specified period. You travel with paper. The gold never moves. When you arrive in London, you present the letter. The London Medici office pays you. The transaction clears through the bank's internal accounting. Everyone's safe. No one gets robbed. And here's the beautiful part. The bank builds a commission into the exchange rate spread. The rate quoted in Florence differs slightly from the rate in London. That difference, often 20 to 50% annualized, is pure profit. This is the birth of international banking. This is the ancestor of wire transfers, SWIFT codes, correspondent banking relationships. Same pattern, same outcome. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Earlier Florentine banks, the Bardi, the Peruzzi, organised as centralised partnerships, one legal entity, all branches, all operations unified under single ownership based in Florence. It was a death sentence. When one branch failed, the losses spread to all branches through shared liabilities. When external shareholders accumulated controlling shares, they could seize the entire company from the founding family. When the senior partner died, succession disputes destabilised everything. The Medici invented something different: the partnership system. Instead of one unified bank, they created a holding company in Florence that held controlling interest, typically 2/3 of the capital, in legally independent partnerships operating in different cities and different industries. Rome, Venice, Milan, London, Bruges, each a separate legal entity with its own capital, its own accounting, its own commission structure. The branch managers weren't salaried employees. They were shareholders who invested their own money and received a share of profits. The Bruges governor in 1455 invested 1,000 florins out of 6,000 total capital, but received 1/5 of profits, not 1/7. This aligned incentives. Managers couldn't engage in private deals, accept bribes, or lend to monarchs without approval. Here's why this matters. Legal separation meant a crisis in one branch couldn't trigger cascading collapse. When one branch failed, the others survived. This is the modern multinational corporation structure. Decentralized subsidiaries, local management autonomy, holding company coordination, profit-sharing incentives, centralized policy, still in use. But even the best systems break. The year is 1343. The two largest banks in medieval Europe, the Bardi and the Peruzzi, are about to collapse. The proximate cause, England's Edward III defaults on 900,000 florins owed to the Bardi, 600,000 to the Peruzzi. Astronomical sums. He'd borrowed to finance wars, he didn't pay. But here's what historians missed for centuries. Edward defaulted years earlier. The bank survived for a while afterward. A third major bank, the Acciaiuoli, failed without lending significantly to England. The real cause was structural. The centralised partnership model meant losses anywhere impacted capital everywhere. External shareholders gained control of the Peruzzi, creating conflicts over strategy. Wars throughout the Mediterranean increased transaction costs. The Champagne fairs, the hub of European commerce, were declining as warfare made French overland routes too dangerous. The Arte del Cambio records tell the story. 71 banks in Florence in 1399, just 33 by 1460. This wasn't a temporary crisis. This was systemic contraction. Yet within decades, new banking families led by the Medici rebuilt using better organisational models. The collapse forced evolution. Weak structures died. Stronger innovations survived. The lesson: financial crises don't destroy systems. They force adaptation. The question is whether your organisation has the structural flexibility to survive the adaptation. Then comes 1348. The Black Death arrives in Florence. Population 120,000. By 1351, 50,000. 55% mortality in 13 years. The economic consequences are counterintuitive. In the immediate aftermath, wages for surviving workers skyrocket. In Suffolk, England, reaping wages jump from 3 pence per acre to 5 pence, a 67% increase. Across England, wages rise 20 to 40% by the 1360s. Workers can suddenly demand more, move to better jobs, escape restrictive arrangements. The labour market inverts. Scarcity favours workers, not landlords. But purchasing power gains get eaten by inflation. Fewer people work the mines. Gold and silver production drops. Yet the existing stock of precious metals in circulation remains high. More money chasing fewer goods. The great inflation of the late 14th century partially offsets nominal wage gains. Real wages, actual purchasing power, barely improve or even decline in some regions. Meanwhile, demand shifts. Bulk commodities like cheap grain collapse. Luxury goods for surviving wealthy merchants increase. Florence pivots to high-end luxury woolens. By the third quarter of the 14th century, Florentine luxury cloth rivals the previously dominant Flemish producers. Premium quality, premium prices narrow wealthy markets. But dependence on imported English wool creates new vulnerabilities. Disruptions, competition, tax burdens all squeeze margins. Florentine cloth production, 75,000 bolts annually in the 1330s, just 9,500 bolts by the 1420s, an 87% decline. The pattern: when labour costs rise and markets contract, businesses survive by moving up market. Premium products, premium customers, smaller volumes, until eventually the market can't support even that. Parallel to banking innovations, Florentine and Genoese merchants invented something else: insurance contracts. The problem: Mediterranean trade faced natural risks, storms, shipwrecks, cargo loss, and human risks. Corsairs, pirates, government-sanctioned privateers disrupting rival states' commerce. The solution emerged around the mid-14th century. The first recognisable modern insurance contract was drafted in Genoa on March 18, 1343. The structure reveals sophisticated risk assessment. Premiums reflected route and distance, longer voyages, higher premiums. Specific routes in the Western Mediterranean plagued by corsairs commanded higher rates. Analysis of over 7,000 medieval insurance contracts shows merchants perceived human risks from corsair attacks as more significant than natural weather risks. Route mattered more than distance. This is modern actuarial science, distinguishing systematic risks from idiosyncratic risks, pricing accordingly. Wealthy merchants with information networks pooled risks by insuring multiple voyages. They profited from the spread between premiums charged and actual losses experienced. They became underwriters. This allowed merchants without information networks to transfer risk to merchants with better information, reducing overall costs. The contemporary parallel: supply chain insurance, disruption coverage, inventory financing. COVID-19 reminded everyone that concentrated supply chains break when disruptions occur. Safety stocks provide insurance. Financial instruments distribute costs. Medieval merchants knew this 700 years ago, so let's connect the threads. Florence in 1300 invented decentralized global supply chains, organized around distant consumers, not local needs. Double-entry accounting that made complex capital flows visible and manageable. Standardized currency that created international trust without centralized authority. Legally separated branch partnerships that prevented localized failures from triggering systemic collapse. Insurance contracts that allowed risk transfer between informed and uninformed parties. Every single one of these innovations is being reinvented right now. Blockchain advocates promise decentralized finance without central banks, just like medieval Lex Mercatoria created commercial law without royal courts. Cryptocurrency proponents toot standardized digital currencies, just like the florin created monetary stability through credible commitment to purity. Modern multinational structure as holding companies with legally separated subsidiaries, the Medici model, perfected. Supply chain visibility platforms track products from source to delivery. Double entry bookkeeping applied to physical goods. Same pattern, same outcome, same vulnerabilities. The Florentine system survived plague, banking collapse, labour revolt, war and currency crises for over 200 years. It thrived because of institutional innovation, not just capital or labour. The question for you: which side of the wealth transfer will you be on when the current system hits its Bardi Peruzzi moment? If this forensic analysis gave you a new lens, hit subscribe. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look. Drop a comment. Type florin if your team hard currency, or ledger if your team